Just stopped by the office to take care of our annual insurance premium for our structural pest control license. Figured this would be a good topic for a video. Stick around. It's been a rough few weeks. We have been fighting the weather, and we've had ice storm and snowstorm, and one day it's warm and the next day it's in the teens, freezing cold. It's just been tough. But if there's one thing that's harder than dealing with all the ups and downs and the weather and all the other crazy things that beekeeping throws at you, it's the regulatory hurdles that you have to jump over to be in compliance with all the rules and regulations and laws that are out there. You know, a long time ago I got into doing cutouts, and it was really by accident. I didn't mean to get into doing cutouts. It just kind of unfolded. I had given my name out to some places, fire departments and animal control and local government and that kind of stuff, as being willing to do swarm removal. So if somebody saw a swarm and they called one of those agencies, they would call me and I would go get the swarm. I figured that'd be a cool way to get some free bees, as well as being helpful to the community. Well, the next thing you know, I get a phone call for a removal, a cutout. It was in an old house. Bees had gotten in the wall, and they'd been there for a long time. And I guess the owners of the property could never find anybody to get them out of there. Well, they got in touch with me, and I said, sure, why not? I'll take a look at it. I've got some experience in construction, quite a lot of experience. And so taking the wall apart, getting the bees out and putting it back together, that wasn't a big deal. You know, a lot of times when I would do removals, we would work out a deal with the property owner and just say, hey, look, you know, you have somebody put this back together the way you want it. We'll just get the bees. And that worked out well. You know, it kind of snowballed, and I got into doing a fair amount of those. I ended up doing 15 or 20 a year there for a while. And then the state of Georgia decided that doing bee removals from a structure was somehow violating a rule or a regulation or a law, and they needed to revamp all that. And so they got together with some other folks that were doing bee removals and beekeepers and ag folks, and they came up with a regulatory framework and a licensing requirement, and more importantly, a penalty for doing live honeybee removals from structures in Georgia. And when that happened, I was really busy with real estate, and I thought to myself, the last thing I need is another license, another certification, another certificate. I've got a stack of them, and I just didn't want to be bothered with it. So when that law first got passed, I just decided, okay, well, that's that. I'm busy with real estate. I'm not going to fool with this. But I kept getting phone calls. People remembered that was something that I did. From time to time, I would get a phone call, and I had to turn down the work. And I realized that I missed doing the work. There is something very rewarding and very gratifying about rescuing bees out of somebody's property, out of their house or out of their structure, and putting those bees to work in a bee yard. It's good for the bees, it's good for the homeowner, it's good for everybody. But the problem was that I didn't have a license. People were calling. I was having to turn down doing removals. So I decided I would go ahead and add to my stack of licenses and go ahead and get the honeybee removal license. Well, it turns out it's not just one license that you have to have two. You have to have the honeybee removal operator license, and then you have to have a structural pest control license. And all of that comes with quite a few requirements. The requirements for having a honeybee removal license, on the operator side, is you have to take a class. And it's not a terrible class. It's an 8-hour class. I went and took mine at the Forsyth County Cooperative Extension Office. And instead of it being one day, an 8-hour class, which it could have been, it was split up into 2 days. So I drove up to Cumming 2 days in a row and got that class knocked out. Not terrible. They talk about some of the basics of bee biology and then the tools that you need to do a bee removal, the basic steps of what is entailed with doing a bee removal, and the requirements under the law for what you have to do after the bee removal, which is, sealing up the cavity, or there's some nuance there, but basically that's what it entails. So that was easy enough. Got the class knocked out. And then look here, I'm happy to see this. Bees are flying today. Once the class is taken care of, you can schedule to go take an exam. And the exam that I took was at Gwinnett Tech. I guess I'm not sure what they're calling it now, but that's what I call it. The Gwinnett Tech College campus. And you've got a certain amount of time. I think it was 3 hours to be able to take the exam, and you have to pass it with a 70. It wasn't a terrible exam. So got the exam part taken care of. Easy enough. Here's the part that's tough. You have to prove experience. Now, if you have bee removal jobs that you did prior to the rule going into place, those can count towards your experience. And luckily, I had plenty of documentation, pictures, and other people that went on these jobs with me, and was able to show that I had the experience requirement met, had done at least 3 bee removals. Was able to send in the pictures and the affidavit and show that. If you don't have that experience prior to the rule going into effect, then you have to do 3 removals supervised by someone that has the license. The next thing is that you have to turn in your application, and that includes lawful presence affidavit for the state of Georgia to show that you're here legally, and then that can get you your honeybee removal operator's license. But to be able to do honeybee removals legally, you have to have a structural pest control company license as well, so that as the honeybee removal person, you're operating under the license of a licensed structural pest control company. So that requires another application, another fee, and proof of insurance, which is what I just got done doing today, was writing the check to renew our insurance policy for that. All of that gets sent in to the Georgia Department of Agricultural Structural Pest Control Commission, and then they will approve your name as what you're going to be doing business under, and get the rest of the details squared away, and then they'll let you know, okay, you're good to go. Now that process took a little while. So we made it through all the process of turning in the applications for both the company and for myself to be the designated operator, or however they call that, the right person. And I'm glad I did it. Like I say, when the rule first came out, I wasn't happy about it, and I didn't want to jump through all those hoops. I thought it was a little bit silly. I understand why they did it. They were apparently getting complaints about people that were doing honeybee removals and either not doing a good job or not having any respect for the actual structure. They were just tearing into the structure and doing it in such a way that caused a lot of damage, and just taking the bees and then leaving the property owner with a big mess and a big repair bill. So I think, from that standpoint, I completely understand why they wanted to put some kind of education requirement and licensing requirement on the industry. It doesn't necessarily mean like I felt like it was something I wanted to do, but I am glad I did it. I enjoy doing the bee removals. I'm happy to be back doing those more regularly, and I'm happy not to face a $10,000 fine for doing a structural bee removal without a license. That's a pretty stiff penalty if you get caught removing bees from a structure in the state of Georgia without the license. So yeah, the insurance, the class, the affidavits, coming up with all the pictures and the history of bee removals that I had done to show the experience. All of that is well worth not having to pay a $10,000 fine. But definitely looking forward to spring. I'm so happy that we've got a nice weather day today. Here we are, it's the first week in February, and it's going to be nice today, almost 60 degrees this afternoon. Blue skies, sunshine, the bees are out flying. There's some red maples blooming, so the bee season is getting underway, and I'll be looking forward to doing some bee removals this spring and putting that license to use. All right, if you got any questions or comments, drop them below. If you like what we're doing, be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks.